Hello, it's Cindy Brannon. I'm here with this edition of the Keeping Her Keys podcast. I've been doing weekly podcasts now for about a month. We're approaching the summer solstice. I've been doing these about a month within the Keeping Her Keys coven, kind of opening them up to a little bit of a broader audience, just to do with some issues within our own network, but also for everyone who's not yet in the coven, to kind of give you an inside scoop about what goes on in the beloved Keeping Her Keys coven network on Mighty Networks. So this is, you can listen to this whether or not you're in the coven this week, as I kind of go through preparing for our big summer solstice sovereign goddess ritual coming up this Saturday. And as I'm claiming my own sovereignty by moving more fully into podcasting, which is going to become my primary communication method, I guess, for connecting with everyone who finds resonance with my work and the Keeping Her Keys community. So kind of shifting and getting more into my sovereignty as we prepare for the summer solstice and what's sure to be a summer of Mars, with Mars and Aries, and just a real time of assertion, courage, and all of those really beneficial attributes of Mars as Mars goes into his home base territory of Aries. Lots of Martian energy coming up in the summer of Mars for sure, and lots of other really important planetary astrological considerations for us to contemplate and to use to our benefit as we gain more empowerment, more healing, as we move deeper into our sovereignty that is really activated, attuned, and heightened with this sovereign goddess ritual that we're doing in the coven on Saturday, right on the solstice. I'm so excited about that. Everyone in the coven, we have been working diligently to prepare for this ritual. We've had excuse me. So if you're in the coven, before we got interrupted by my coughing, we have been prepping for our ritual for the last few weeks. We've had talks about sovereignty and the 5 goddesses that we summon forth and awaken from within. We've had a really fun pop-it workshop, and we just had, yesterday we had a great sovereignty oil workshop, which was so much fun. You can find those videos in the coven, and tips on how to dive into this energy. You'll be seeing special posts from our Kidamos, our priest Jeffrey, who's got the weekly playlist to get you to your most sovereign goddess self, and the priestesses who will be leading the ritual on Saturday will be talking this week about how they prepare and how they're connecting to their goddesses. And our priestess of music, she will be sharing our special song that will have featured in the ritual this weekend. So definitely the sovereign goddess ritual is one of our 7 big rituals that we do in Keeping Her Keys. So we do what's known as the rituals of the sacred cave. So that's release, soul retrieval, and rebirth. Then we do the sovereign goddess ritual, which is about expansion, empowerment through expansion. Then we do the Kaliak ritual on the winter solstice, which is about empowerment through introspection. And then we do Night of Hekate, and we also do our coven commitment ceremony known as the Nissa once a year. So that's our 7 rituals that we do. Like to keep them about 6 weeks apart so we can kind of process for one and then prepare for the other. So that is our ritual cycle. So here we are, sovereign goddess ritual time. how do you prepare for a ritual? So I'm going to talk about a technique for getting ready for a ritual that I've used over the years, and that I think it'll be really helpful for you. It's a great one to kind of sit with your journal and contemplate as you prepare. So we're going to talk about the astrology and ritual preparation. So there's two kinds of things that you would do, two activities, two different streams that you would use to look at how astrology is interacting with your ritual. So I guess the most, and I'm going to talk about this one first, and then I'm going to talk about the astrology of the summer solstice this year after. So I'm going to start by talking about how we can look at the themes, the energies of a ritual, and then see how they conjunct, if you will, with our chart. So if you don't have your chart, you can go to astro.com, and for free you can get your own natal chart calculated, and that'll be really helpful. And last month when we had our workshop on finding Hekate in your chart within the coven, you can go and watch that video, and it'll give you some more insight into how you can get your chart off of astro.com for free. So basically, so there's so many layers to astrology. There's so much depth to it, just like there is to the 5 goddesses that we connect with in this ritual. So there's so much depth to it. I recommend, to get your journal ready and look at the energies of a ritual. Look at your sun sign, which is like your personality, like what you present to others. It's like the sun sign is like the self in relation to others. What other people see, what you want other people to see, how people react to you, kind of on that more surface relationship level. So that's your sun sign. And then your moon sign is really about your inner world. It's about your emotions. It's about what's not seen. It's about others in relation to the self. You can see, so it's like sun is like self in relations to others. So the emphasis is on others. And then the moon is like others in relation to self. You're shifting. So sun is much more overt, maybe action oriented. And moon is much more emotional, introspective. So it's very different. And then our ascendant, I think of the ascendant is like almost sometimes like the stage upon which, like if you think the sun is kind of like our outward self and the moon is our inner self, and together it's like that's who we are, more or less. And then the ascendant is almost like here we are, we're this actor put together, with self in relation to others and others in relation to self, this kind of duality, and then we're put on a stage. And so the ascendant a lot of times is like the stage, or the ascendant can also be like the influencer. So it's like almost like the devil or angel on your shoulder. Well, obviously both devil and angel, because all the signs have both aspects to them, light and dark. And that's kind of like how I see the ascendant. I'm only going to focus on the sun, but I really encourage you to look at your sun and your moon and then your ascendant, and to go deeper into the themes of any ritual to see how you might experience the ritual. It's even useful to see if a ritual is really good for you. So I have this like long-standing dislike for really ceremonial rituals. So it's like this ritual is about we have to do things precisely this way. If we don't do it this way, the gods will be displeased and will come down and their wrath will come down upon us. Anything like that, I am 100% checking out. And if I look at my chart and say, oh, do I really want to do this lesser banishing ritual, for example, then, you can see like my sun sign is Gemini. So when I'm being that overt person, in the world, I have this dualistic, well, I want to do that ritual with those folks. That would be, it'd be kind of cool. I'm curious. but also the side that says, hell no, absolutely not. And then I have a Libra moon. So it's like, I got that balance coming in. But then I have Scorpio sitting on my shoulder. And Scorpio saying, I don't think this ritual is deep enough. I need it to be deeper. And it'd be nice if we could have some sex. So you can see just from that kind of comical explanation about why I might react kind of strongly to a ritual that's very prescriptive, very ceremonial, doesn't leave any room for creativity. So, that's really great when picking a ritual. And it's also great when you've already committed to doing a ritual, so you've been drawn to it. Something about that ritual awakens something within you. And then as you're preparing for it, get your journal out and say, okay, so these are the themes. This is a ritual of healing or soul retrieval. And how might I interact and experience this ritual based on my sun, moon, and ascendant? You can go deeper and deeper, wherever you're at in your astrology expertise. It was really, there's no limits with astrology. And in particular with this ritual, it's really interesting because there is so much astrologically we can do with this ritual. So if you are not familiar with the sovereign goddess ritual, that is, like I said, in the coven, we really do this as a summer solstice ritual. It's about boldly stepping into the light of day. As witches and wild folk, we often are more comfortable underneath the pale moonlight. And, true sovereignty is about, boom, here I am in the light of day. So in this ritual, we connect with and awaken within 5 goddesses. So Hekate as the wise one, Persephone kind of as the queen. So Persephone is, of course, the queen of the underworld, and then she comes back up to earth and turns the wheel of the year. So very much in connection with earth energy. She's a very earthy queen. And then we also connect with Medea, the wounded one, the poison queen. Circe, the witch queen, she is the eternal witch, and Artemis, the wild queen, the youthful maiden, sometimes seen as a princess, which is it's like reducing Persephone to Kore, to her maiden aspect only. Artemis is wild, but she is not just youthful wildness, she's also mature wildness, and all of those. So those are our 5 goddesses. So Hekate is kind of this Anima Mundi-esque soul of the world, the fire of all creation. And she is the wise one, which we might see as the crone. She has seen it all, done it all. And she is the woman who is fully empowered and wise. Persephone is the woman who, is the mature woman who, she's not as mature, for example, as Hekate, but she's seen it all. She's had some really bad times, and she's a survivor, and she's an emotional warrior, right? Like, she is the warrior queen. She is the one who makes the hard choices, who leans into difficult situations, and still she rises. Medea is, the poison queen. She has both the power of healing and death. She is the wounded one. Like, she is the queen who acts out at times with rage because it's just all too much. There are too many emotions. There's too much shit was done to her. Circe, of course, had quite a troubled life, like all of our queens. Triumph over tragedy and abduction and assault and violence and all these things. Circe is very much like the queen who is on her island, who learned to be queen over witchcraft and magic and pharmakeia, which is plant spirit work, because of her isolation. She is the archetype of the witch, that you have this power within you and you awaken it. And that often does come through isolation, right? And Artemis, of course, is the wild goddess within us. And we all express our wildness differently. So, like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of a dive into how you may experience each of these goddesses within you, and perhaps how you understand them based on your sun sign. So, of course, keeping in mind that our sun sign is really about self in relation to others. So the emphasis is going to be on more of that, like things we're likely to do, things we are likely to, kind of let percolate in a more public way, things that are more likely to be personality characteristics rather than kind of like those deeply held things. Like, that's the moon. The moon is like that container for that inner world. The sun is more like, I'm shining, here's my personality. Self in relation to others, not others in relation to self. Okay, so I am going to begin. I think what we'll do is we'll begin at the beginning. So we'll begin with Aries. So if Aries is your sun sign, and my beloved sister is an Aries, so of course I was thinking about her when I was crafting just, some notes about how an Aries might awaken, Artemis, Circe, Medea, Persephone, and what Hecate's wisdom would be for an Aries when we're looking at these archetypes. And keeping in mind, again, we're looking at Artemis as wild, Circe as witch, Medea as the wounded one, Persephone as that warrior figure, that survivor figure, and then bringing it all together to synthesize so we can reveal Hecate's wisdom. So if you are an Aries, so Aries, of course, fire sign, wands, it's that wild fire that burns. So the Artemis energy within an Aries sign is like this wildfire. And one of the things with Aries is that, so Aries burns so bright and they have so much. And they're so no bullshit. They can really, their wildness can be like this blazing wildfire that they're just going off where angels fear to tread, which is good sometimes, but it's also like a real opportunity to look in your own life how you've kind of been that blazing fire running off, just full of courage, full of assertion, and what you've kind of done, like how that wildness could be tempered and how it's really served you well. So that's a little bit about how your Artemis, if you're an Aries, how your Artemis might present itself. I just had some sushi quickly, so maybe the sushi's giving me a little throatiness here. Sometimes it does. All right, so let's move on to Circe. So Circe, the archetype of the witch, right? So what is the Aries witch? So the Aries witch, again, it's a lot about this fiery magic, candle magic, burning things, like those spells. Aries are going to be burning shit. Focuses on assertiveness, courage, and a lot of times with Aries, like Aries is the no bullshit sign, like 100%. You're never going to get bullshit from an Aries. So Aries can be really focused on, I want the truth, I want the truth, I want the truth. So the focus on spell work or rituals can be a lot about getting at the truth. One thing that if you are an Aries, how to really strengthen your Circe, obviously a lot of firework is going to be good, and learning to control that fire, learning to not just burn it all down. So taking smaller doses maybe of candle magic, or maybe even trying to balance that out, because we all have a missing element. So you might want to look at, water signs kind of Circe energy to see that as a complement to yours. I made up, I did a little chart from my own notes for this, so I'll pop that in with the podcast in the coven, so you can have a look at this chart I did up to kind of help you. Okay, so when it comes to Medea, again, the wounded one, how is that Medea energy going to present to you? How is it in how you kind of interact with your personality and others? And this again is where that no filter issue that is so great and such a strength of Aries. So that no filter can really be like this brusque personality. The Medea, the Aries Medea, within you is going to be focused on that energy. So if you have a wound, you're going to use this brusqueness, this courage, like of a bravado, if you know what I mean. So it's like you could be really wounded, but because your Medea is in your Aries, that what you're going to be doing is hiding your pain. The other thing is that, just a caveat, is like sometimes a little discretion goes a long way, and your no bullshit approach to life and your filter being off most of the time can actually lead you to getting wounded. So that's some wisdom around that coming up from our Hekate if Aries is your sun sign. So this is interesting when we talk about like Persephone energy. So the queen who walks the wheel of time. And if you are fiery, like your wheel is a fire wheel, right? So that's what you're the queen of. And it's also like, this is the victorious queen. This is, Aries don't like to lose. And they are the ambitious, how sometimes you see it instead of ambitious. They are the ambitious queen sometimes. So that's it, Persephone, the ambitious queen. And if we kind of synthesize all this, and here's where I would say to you, get your notebook out, and say, okay, so what is the wisdom of this? What's the takeaway message? So what is the wise one saying? What is the wise Aries? What is it within you, the Aries Hekate, or the Hekate Aries, right? It's like learning to control those torches and use those torches to light your own path, light your way for others, and not just to like burn things down, to use those torches with responsibility because your torches burn so bright. Okay, so that is our first fire sign of Aries. So let's go on to Taurus now. So if you're a Taurus sun sign, you express that Artemis wild queen energy about, you're steady, right? Like, so your wildness isn't like blazing and just going off everywhere, blazing trails. You're the steady wild one, which sounds like, how can I be steady and wild? It's like, but think about this. So like Artemis is the archer. So if you're Taurus, your Artemis energy is going to be around making sure that shot is true and steady, and you're going to be really slow. So if you are going to do something wild, out of character, it's going to be really measured. It's not going to be, this like, I'm just going to blaze trails everywhere. It's going to be really measured. So for the Taurus, the Artemis energy is sometimes lower, so you might want to think about that. The Circe energy of a Taurus is a lot of witchy treasures. Oh, you bulls, you have so many beautiful witchy treasures. It's probably organized, and you've probably had them for a long time. Your spells and rituals are probably going to focus on materialization. So like, getting things you need, like a new car, a new house, a lot of that. So a lot of manifestation work. So you might want to balance that out with more mystical work, more like just let yourself astral travel or work on your psychic skills to kind of, develop what's missing in your kind of witchy toolkit. The Medea of Taurus is very much about being wounded by unreliability. So, because Tauruses are about reliability. They're about, this is it, steady, true, sometimes perceived as slow. So the thing that will really, really wound a Taurus, so the Medea Taurus will be wounded by unreliability. Now, this queen, our Persephone in Taurus, that queen is, she is the queen sitting on the velvet throne, wearing her diamond tiara, where did that come from? Tiara, crown. And, she has this kind of crown of horns that's maybe like, it's got some glitter on it. And, she's very concerned, but she's very steady in her glamour and in her luxuriousness. It's a really steady, not flighty. So that is, how you are the queen, Persephone. Walking that wheel of the year with your beautiful, bedazzled queen of horns. So Hecate's wisdom here is, the bullishness, the kind of steadfastness of Tauruses. It's really fantastic, and you can accomplish much. You need to put a little bit of space into what you're doing. And so when you're doing your journaling and thinking about connecting to this ritual, come at this ritual with this idea of, just you're going to back off with your horns a little bit, look fabulous, of course, because you're a Taurus, and allow the ritual just to kind of awaken that wildness within you. So next, we move on to Gemini. So, where Gemini is about curiosity and, this duality, Gemini is like the most human of signs, because Gemini is kind of like all the signs put together at any one time. That comes out as this, they like structure, but they don't want structure. They're happy to be in one place. They would rather be anywhere else. So whereas Taurus is super steady, Gemini tends to need a lot of flexibility. So Gemini, in terms of Gemini's Artemis energy, it's really like this curiosity. Like, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I went out with this fella? And it's just like Geminis get wild because they are bored and because they are curious. So Geminis can end up going wild in all kinds of directions. And Geminis often, like the wisdom of this ritual would be more like Taurus maybe, and be a little bit more structured, just a little bit more structured. I'm a Gemini, so I'm always like a little bit of structure is nice. A little Libra thrown in is good. When it comes to the Circe of the Gemini, it's very much about creativity, right? So Geminis, read all the books because they're curious, and then they throw them away. Or they take the books to make something really cool out of. So Gemini rituals and spells are going to be really creative. And Geminis are really concerned about ideas. And not about judgy ideas, just about Geminis love ideas, all the information. And so Geminis are often really, really super well read about esoteric things, about everything. Geminis read everything, right? So a lot of creativity in your spells, a lot of knowledge, diverse knowledge in the Gemini Circe library as well. Here's with the Medea aspect of Gemini, what's going to happen a lot with Geminis is because Gemini's curiosity can be lack of boundaries. And one of the, the wisdom for Gemini is get your boundaries in place. I mean, the wisdom for all the signs is get your boundaries in place or open up for some of them, like Taurus. So Gemini will sometimes get in trouble because of that. The other thing that the Medea aspect of a Gemini will be like the actor. So the Gemini can be very, very wounded inside. No one will ever know. It's a facade, right? They put on this facade. The other thing with Geminis is when they're wounded, they really can come off as insincere and lack authenticity because they are putting on this facade. And when Geminis are being fakesters, they're also more likely to get wounded and to kind of attract people who are troubled into their lives because they're not Geminis who aren't living true, who are putting on these facades, and Geminis are such great actors, they do it all the time, they end up with the wrong people coming into their lives, and that can be kind of a disaster. So that's a lot of Gemini, Medea energy, the wounded energy, the poison to Geminis, if you will. And the Gemini Persephone aspect is very much about pain and power coexisting at the same time. It's never one or the other with a Gemini, right? It's and. I am pain and power. I am both. So it's this kind of balancing act. So the wisdom of Gemini is that, get those boundaries in place. Like, look to Hekate as the wise one, the wise teacher of boundaries, and for guidance about setting good boundaries, and adding some structure as necessary. So look, for the ritual, look to the structured aspects of the ritual. All right, so that's Gemini. Let's move on to Cancer. So Cancer is like the mother of the zodiac. It ruled by cups and the element of water. Cancer is very sensitive, very nourishing. And so the Artemis aspect of Cancer is about tending to the wild ones. So Cancers can kind of accumulate a collection of wild ones, whether it's animals, you're rescuing baby birds, or wild people, So Cancers are often like, oh, look, you're really wild, however, you define wild, and I'm going to take care of you, rather than being wild themselves. Cancers, when it comes to the Circe, the witch aspect of Cancer, it's very much focused on others. Cancer loves to help others, loves to heal others. Sometimes others don't want the healing, and sometimes Cancers go too far. So Cancers tend to do a lot of magic and a lot of ritual about healing other individuals, like healing their sick school teacher, or healing a dog that broke its leg down the road, or really focused on this really kind of amazing individualized healing work. A lot of protection work for the home, whereas Gemini are like, I figure I can handle whatever comes along. Cancer is going to be like, no, I have all the wards up around my house, thank you. And would you like me to make you a ward for your house too? That's Cancer when it comes to the Circe aspects. Now, the Medea of Cancer. So the thing with Cancers is that they're so nourishing because they're so empathic. They're so dialed in. So Cancers are like, the Medea aspect of Cancers, it's like all the wounds all the time. Because Cancers are often not wounded when they get their feelings hurt, right? Like, so Cancers are so empathic, but then they also take on the wounds of other people. And then if there's other people they try to nourish and heal and they can't help them, then they take on more wounds. So really, the Medea aspect of Cancer is, just so much about this sensitivity and taking on all of these deep emotional wounds and these deep emotional scars. So I would say that that's very much like taking into, like, we're in this waning moon now, and doing some journaling around, if you're a Cancer, that Medea aspect and how you've been wounded by others and what maybe there you need to release going into the ritual. So the Persephone, who is the queen of Cancer, so your Persephone aspect is very much, again, the mother, the pure kind of like the mother aspect of the Queen of Cups. So it's very much like, I will take care of all of you. I will take care of all 13 dogs that live in my house. I will take care of all my children. I will take care. So you are very much this kind of benevolent queen, but you do have this tendency to give away your power. So as we go into the sovereignty ritual, think about that and let those messages kind of come through from Persephone about how you can borrow some of Persephone's other characteristics from the other signs to really stand in your power and to not be kind of like the all-consumed queen. So Hecate's wisdom for Cancer as you prep for the ritual, and just in general, is to always nourish yourself, Cancer. Take good care of yourself, and especially like when we think of like self in relation to others. So it's very much like Cancer is very much the sign of like, if we had like self and others on a scale, like others would be like the heavy part of the scale, and self would be very light for Cancer. So you want to bring some balance into that, definitely. All right, so let's move on to lovely Leo. Okay, so Leo's great. I just love Leos. I've had a lot of really, like my romantic partners, I like Leos. I like me some Leos. Okay, so Leos. So Leos, when it comes to your Artemis aspect, when your wild aspect, it's going to be about playing, right? So your wildness is going to be about playing. So it can be like, playing sports. I don't know, whatever wild sports are for you. Or it could be about, just being playful and finding wild ways to be playful. And kind of like as you get older, like your wildness is going to be around, maybe costumes, for example. That's a way to express your wildness. So that's kind of your Artemis energy for your Leo. And, your Circe, like who is your witch? Like your witch within, if you're a Leo sun sign, you may be drawn to like fiery witchcraft that's more kind of like structured than like Aries, and maybe solar witchcraft. You may like solar deities, solar goddesses, and you like to kind of play with fire. So maybe a little bit of, just taking some chances, not like super wildfire, and you really like to show off. So and that's a good thing. Like there's nothing, be proud of yourself. Leo is amazing to remind us that we should be proud of ourselves, for all of us who don't have Leo in your chart anywhere, right? Like it's good to be proud of ourselves and take good care of ourselves. And like hell, when we look amazing, we should say we look amazing. But there is this kind of like show-offy aspect for Leo. So you want to just temper that. Not everything needs to be shared. And remember that. So the Medea for Leos, so the wounded one. So Leos can often, like the pride of a Leo is like a teaching for all of us. But you know that pride cometh before the fall. So Leos are likely to get wounded when they have felt like, oh, I am amazing and I am wonderful today and look at me and I've got it all together. And then someone comes along and like knocks them off of their own pedestal that they've put themselves on. That's the Leo's wound. And the Leo's wound is also like, I don't want to look bad. I want to look good, because Leos can kind of veer into narcissism. And a lot of times really wounded Leos who have had a lot of trauma, it can come off like as narcissism or self-obsession, but that's just how they're expressing their wound. So if you are a Leo, your Persephone is like the benevolent, very well put together fiery queen who is very proud of her accomplishments. And, Hecate's wisdom for the Leo is very much in keeping with, be proud of your accomplishments, stand in your own power, don't be afraid of your sovereignty. And again, that's why I'm saying Leos have so much to teach the rest of our signs, right? When it comes to like, be proud of yourself. But don't veer into egocentricity, right? Like you don't want to be, like the world is not all about you. And, borrow some of that energy from Cancer to be more focused on like how you can use your sovereignty to help others, which is ultimately only going to empower you more. So let's move on to our Virgo. So Artemis energy for the Virgo is very much about innocence, about the maiden. So Virgos are not a wild sign. They're not Geminis going off on sexual escapades or Aries burning shit down just because I wanted to. So Virgo is the maiden, the innocent wild one. And again, we see kind of this emphasis on not them so much expressing their wildness, but aiding others with their wildness. So it's like this kind of innocent, the true innocence that like, it's like, well, I'm just going to do my own thing in my own way, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just doing my thing over here. I'm just going to do my thing. And so it does have that kind of youthful wildness. It's not like that super mature wild where it's like, I am intentionally burning everything down today, and you can call me Aries. So that's a little bit of the Artemis vibe, that youthful Artemis. And you see these images like in art where Artemis is kind of portrayed as like, those Diana images where she's like this 16-year-old girl with like hardly no clothes on and carrying a bow and arrow, which you would think you would want some clothes on if you're going to be walking around with bows and arrows. That's just me. So Circe for the Virgo, what is the witch aspect of Virgo? So Virgo's like details. So if you're a Virgo, you're going to express the Circe witch vibe with a lot of details. So a lot of detailed notes, perhaps, or really like when you set up your altar, you've got all the details in place. And your rituals and spells are going to be focused on details too. This, of course, can strive into perfectionism. And there's also a lot of emphasis on like health spells, like healing yourself, and making sure like you are healthy. Like a lot of that energy around that kind of spell work and ritual work. When it comes to the Medea, the wounded aspect of Virgo, high expectations are where Virgos get their wounds. Virgos can be very perfectionistic, and it can be really hard for anybody to live up to the energy of what is expected by Virgos. When Virgos kind of get into their shadow selves, they have these really high expectations of others. So really watch out for that. And that's where your wounds are going to be, is around these expectations, when people don't meet those expectations. Virgo, the Persephone aspect of Virgo is kind of like the self-comfort queen. Virgo's throne is very comfortable, very tricked out. Maybe there's a cooler in one side, and her crown is very comfortable, and very detail-oriented. So that's the Persephone aspect of Virgo, reigning from a place of comfort, and trying not to be too judgmental. And that is our wisdom of Hekate for Virgo, is, it's good to be detail-oriented. The world needs detail-oriented, but letting that veer into shadowland where it becomes judgmental, harsh, insultive, watch that. Get some balance on that as you go. And of course, speaking of balance, it is time to talk about Libra in our exploration of these 5 goddesses and how we might connect to them, and how they are part of who we are. Because of course, the goddesses live within us just as much as they live outside of us, and exploring these archetypes within us, it helps us to say, oh yeah, this is how I'm like Persephone, this is how I'm like Medea, this is how I'm not like them, so I'm going to borrow some of the aspects from other places in the chart. And that's a really good process to go through, like as you're getting ready for the ritual. So the Artemis aspect of Libra is like this romanticized version of the wild, like longing for the wild, seeing it in this kind of romantic way. Like, it's like riding down the highway on your Harley with your wind in your hair. Not that you've ever done it, but you have a romanticized vision of these things. So, like wildness requires action. So work towards that kind of romanticized wildness, to unleash that within you. Maybe bring it down, a few notches, get some borrow some details from Virgo there, and figure out how you can really bring to life your romantic wildness, which is romanticized. It's not necessarily just about romance. It's about this kind of romanticized version of what your own wild self might be. Get out and be wild a little bit. So Libra can be all about indecision. So when it comes, it's so sometimes I get asked questions about, well, I don't know if I should do this ritual. Cindy, do you think I should do this ritual? And I'll be like, well, what do you think? Well, there's this and there's that and there's that. So I'm like, oh, I am clearly speaking to someone who has some Libra going on in their chart. So the Circe aspect of Libra is very much connected to this balancing act. So it's like, oh, I want to do this thing, but then I don't want to do this thing. And is that too dark magic? Do I need to counter that with something? So you can see, this is like Libras are always, especially when it comes to the sun aspect, and it's like, what am I going to do kind of aspect. It's like, well, do I do that ritual or not? Do I do this thing or not? Do I believe what this author said to me or not? And it can be really paralyzing. Libras can get super paralyzed, super stuck when it comes to spiritual growth because of this back and forth. And the Medea aspect of Libra is also really, really connected to this idea of imbalance, right? And where a Libra is going to get really super wounded is in a relationship where they perceive there is an imbalance. So it's like, I did all this stuff for them. So, Virgos can be really like, I've got my list of things you did right and wrong. Libras kind of do that too, maybe in a less kind of like note-taking way, but they do it like, this isn't equal, this isn't fair, this isn't right. Whereas Virgos can kind of like give you a detailed list of everything that you've ever done wrong. Libras sometimes it's about this overall fairness. And that is where, you're going to betray a Libra and you're going to wound a Libra and bring out that Medea poison queen in the Libra when it is about this imbalance. I gave you everything and you gave me nothing in return. That kind of energy is really where the Libra's wounds are going to lie. So then we have our queen, the queen who's going to come along and be like, well, I'm going to correct these wounds. So this is the queen of discretion, right? So this is Persephone as, the queen who doesn't tell tales. It's the queen who kind of seeks balance and justice and all those kinds of things, and keeps her own counsel a lot of times, because that, Libras can be super romantic, super like, love me. And they can also be like, well, I'm over here as an introvert. And, this can be kind of like that balancing act for Libras. So it's the queen of discretion. The queen of balance is the Persephone aspect. And the Hecate's wisdom for this is going to be very much around, like, sometimes you need to stop keeping score, right? So it's like you need to put the scales down and just go with it. Just go with it. So now let's move on to our next sign. And we're at Scorpio, of course. Scorpio. All right, so Scorpios, like their Artemis energy is strong, right? Scorpios are really passionate. They have a lot of wildness. It's a sign with a lot of wildness, but it's a lot of emotional wildness, if that makes sense. And because Scorpio is associated with passion and sex and desire, there's a lot of like sexual exploration. Sexual wildness is likely to be found, and also about wildness about in the dark. So, and I don't mean dark in a negative sense. I mean like Scorpios will find themselves in places and situations where they're expressing their sacred wildness in ways that some of the more timid signs would be absolutely shocked and outraged to find. The Circe, the witch of the Scorpio, is really going to be focused a lot on these aspects, like these darker aspects. So a lot of involvement with dark goddesses for Scorpions, death walking, ancestor work, mediumship. That's the Circe aspect of Scorpio. The Medea aspect. So this is actually something that's kind of difficult to talk about. So Scorpio, the beauty of the sexual power of Scorpio is amazing. And of course, the shadow of that is that, there's a lot of sexual trauma that can be associated with the Scorpio, especially the sun sign aspect of it. And that is a lot of wounded Scorpions. Their Medea, their poison one, is about, having some kind of sexual trauma in the past. So it's a difficult one to tackle. And going into the ritual, if, you want to focus on how can you be more sovereign and release, again, we're in the waning moon, so release that sexual trauma. And we do have some healing resources in the Medea course that you may want to look at, or even pull a card or two to see, like, how can I release some of my wounds so I can truly be sovereign. The Persephone aspect is about being the queen of desire. The queen, this is like the aspect of the Queen of Cups that is more sexualized. And it's also like the aspect of the Queen of Cups, which is very much like legs spread, revealing like the universe between her legs. So that is like both death and desire. So that is the aspect of this, the Queen of Scorpio, as shown to us by our dear Persephone. So the Hekate, the wise woman who comes forward within the Scorpion and to teach the Scorpion, it's about these torches. So yeah, go into the dark, go into the depths, do some death walking, be that sacred womb of passion and desire. And, make sure you've got some torches lit so you can see where you're going, and that you're also not just kind of blindly stumbling around in the dark. So Sagittarius, the philosopher queen. So Sagittarians, when it comes to their Artemis, it's often this kind of restlessness. Rather than, when we see other signs that are like, I'm just going to go out there and do some wild things. Sagittarians can be wild, but Sagittarians can have a lot of restless energy. So it's like, I really want to be wild. I'm restless. I need to get out there. I need to do this thing. That restless energy of Artemis, that kind of pacing energy almost. Like, almost like a lion in a cage, or like, and Sagittarius is the archer. So there's a lot to learn if you're a Sag, and in terms of your Artemis self, like about those arrows, where you're shooting them, how can you make them true, and how can you follow through so you're not always restless. So how you can get yourself a little bit of adventure, a little bit of escape, how you can get those things. So for Circe, because Sagittarians are so philosophical, there's a lot of focus on witchcraft, learning systems, learning history, learning the philosophy, so maybe occult philosophy or New Age philosophy, all of these kinds of things, and really a focus on source. Like, what is the source? What is the source? Hekate is anima mundi. Hekate is source. And, and almost like more of an esoteric approach to ritual and spellcraft and energy work, rather than, like signs that are like Cancer is always running a healing spell for somebody. Sagittarians are less likely to always be having like a million little altars everywhere, and more likely just to be like, I'm going to think. I'm really looking into the philosophy, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and those kinds of things for our Sagittarians. Our Persephone is the illuminated queen. You know, the queen who is the philosophy queen, who is thinking deep thoughts and studying systems and schools of belief and things. That is our Persephone for this. The wisdom of Hekate for Sagittarius is, it's really interesting, right? So Sag, you're out there and you don't just want the history, you want the philosophy. So I'm going to say Hecate's wisdom, you can get satisfied, you can find a bit of adventure, because you also love that, in exploring like historical texts, in particular the philosophical treatises, the Chaldean oracles, that will bring Hekate kind of into a very philosophical, wise way for you. So now let's move on to the Capricorns. So Capricorn, the CEO, right? This is the queen. This is the Persephone who's like, the queen is sitting at the head of the business table, right? She's there. She's got a chair in the meeting. Artemis energy for Capricorns is often a challenge. So they will be like, I'd like to be wild. I'd like to go on an adventure. I'd like to do this thing. But I'm going to need a whole bunch of rules to do it. So it can be a bit of repressed wildness. So it's definitely like your Artemis aspect is definitely something to work on in terms of, you know, wild Artemis, letting her be wild. Don't restrict your Artemis to be like, and we must shoot our arrows this way and that way. Let her shoot her arrows where she wants and see what happens. You've got arrows after all. You're perfectly safe. Okay, so the Circe aspect of Capricorn is going to be very much about traditions, very much, you know, maybe like the rule of three, karma. You know, like these are traditional things and I am going to follow them, and rules are good and order is good, and I would like my rituals to be ordered and structured. Thank you. So, which is fantastic, right? We all need a little bit, we all need order in our life, but you also need to have some space. And this sovereign goddess ritual is really good because there are aspects of it where you just kind of allow the goddesses to awaken within you and allow them to speak into you and to merge and blend with their energy in just a way that is very intuitive and not regulated. So like I mentioned earlier, the Persephone aspect of Capricorn is the queen boss CEO. And that's fantastic. You know, you can run the shit like nobody else. And that's really one of your greatest strengths, right? Is that you have that kind of ability to be that kind of regulated, be the regulator. And that's a really amazing strength. And Hecate's wisdom is always going to be for the Capricorn. You know, it's like, have some breathing room in your life. You know, breathe some space into whatever it is you're doing to allow like these missing elements, you know, like to allow creativity, because it's there somewhere in your chart. So don't just be so Capricorn that you don't let these other aspects come in. And now we are all the way to Aquarius. So the Artemis energy of Aquarius is the cool kid, right? You know, the wild, cool kid sitting in the back of the classroom, no fucks given. That is the wild Artemis aspect. Aquarius, you don't need any coaching on your cool kid, wild Artemis self, because you've got that down cold, baby. You are cool. Magic, the Circe aspect for Aquarius is really about originality. You know, Aquariuses value originality. They like to be innovators, and they like to come up with ways of doing things. And then they'll stick to it once they find something that is unique to them and it'll work. There's also a lot of rituals and spells and energy work done by Aquarians, so the Circe aspect for them, in terms of like helping humanity as a whole. So Cancer is about, I'm going to help all the individuals. Aquarius is very much about, I am going to help all of the humans, and I'm going to evolve humanity. I'm going to, help the revolution. Aquarians tend to be involved in some really big issues. The Medea, the wounded aspect of Aquarius, is sometimes about like disillusionment. So it's like Aquarians can hold humanity up and be like, if I do this thing, it will fix all the problems of all of humanity. And so Aquarians don't tend to be a super emotional sign, but they will get hurt and betrayed by when either whole groups or individuals somehow violate what they think is valued in humanity as a whole. The other aspect, of course, Aquarians tend to come off as aloof. And although maybe they're not an emotional sign, just based on sun signs, obviously it'll be more complicated in a whole chart. But it's like this aloofness can kind of distance them from others. And once in a while, Aquarians do need somebody else, and they can get wounded there because maybe they want that connection and they don't quite know how to get it. So that's kind of the Medea aspect of Aquarius. And sometimes Aquarians don't like people as individuals. So that's definitely a way that an Aquarian can get wounded. And definitely some wisdom there. Work on that. Work on seeing people as individuals, and maybe step out of like the big picture so much. So this is like the Persephone, the big picture. She's focused on humanity as a whole, social order, but she also has this really innovative side to her. And the wisdom of Hekate is like what I said earlier. It's like, put some space for what you're missing, in terms of allowing individuals it's okay to need people. It's okay to trust people. And, what you will still be this amazing Queen of Swords. And you can have people in your life that you're close to and that you let them in and see everything that's going on in your inner world. And so now let's wrap this up with Pisces, the dreamer. So Pisces Artemis aspect is about being wild, kind of in this dreamy astral way. So Pisces are not going to go out and burn things down, but Pisces are going to like wander in the astral plane. Their wildness is going to be focused more around emotions, and maybe feeling the feelings. And so Pisces Artemis aspect can be really kind of spacey wildness, like you're off in daydreams. And it can also be a lot of emotions. So, like where we see like the Artemis energy for the air signs, for example, is very much about, not being too aloof, shooting arrows, and when we come to Pisces, it's like, don't be too emotional. Like, let your wildness kind of be tempered by a little bit of structure, a little bit of earthiness, perhaps, and a little bit of fire. Like, don't always just be kind of wandering around, daydreaming about being wild. Do some wildness, and a lot of Pisces are going to just want to express their wildness like in the astral world. They're going to want to do a lot of spiritual journeying, and that's how like that sacred wildness will come out, is in that realm. The Circe, the witch aspects of Pisces, very mystical, like Akashic records, psychic, like third eye, all of these kind of like really mystical, divination, all of these aspects, a lot of intuition. So not so much like systems, like rules. It's like following my intuition into these realms. The Medea aspect, how Pisces can get wounded, is like with the dream crushers. So Pisces have a dream and whatever it was, and their deepest wounds are likely to be when their dreams get crushed. And because they are really, really deep feelers, that it's going to be a deep emotional wound. And there can be like, when Pisceans are wounded, it can be almost like, because there's so much water, it can almost be like they're drowning in this wound, right? Like, so the wound will not go away. So the queen, the Persephone aspect of this is the queen of idealism. You know, Pisces are very much like the dreamers, and they kind of have this utopian, they can kind of have like a utopian expectation of what the world can be. And they can see this different world, and they can feel this different world because of their emotional prowess. So that's that queen aspect of our Persephone. So Hecate's wisdom for Pisces is just about balancing emotions with motions. So don't be so daydreamy that you don't do the things, right? So Capricorns, it's like, I'm just doing the things. There's no room for dreams in my world. Pisces is very much, can be the opposite when we go into shadow Pisces, and we don't get that balance. So that is a quick tour of sun signs and how they map onto the 5 goddesses that we're going to be connecting with in our ritual. So like I said, it's, you know, like take some time, get your notebook out, make some notes, and, you know, just contemplate how, like, your Artemis, your Circe, your Medea, your Persephone, and Hekate, the wisdom, the wise one, in what she has to say about how these goddesses are positioned within your sun sign, and maybe take it to your moon sign and your ascendant. And of course, you know, it's an ongoing project of mine to look at the asteroids that are associated with all of these goddesses. And in the coven, you can learn how to find Hekate, the star Hekate, in your chart and get some wisdom there. So this is like a big project I've been working on now for quite a while, off and on, and I'm dedicating more time to it now. Probably a book in this somewhere. What I haven't talked about is, I'm just going to conclude by talking about the astrology of the summer solstice. So if you go to our Wheel of the Year class, you'll see that I have the summer solstice chart up there, so you can study it yourself. Got a lot happening with the summer solstice. First of all, we have a new moon, the dark moon, that's happening. And so that is really powerful. We're moving into Cancer. So again, moving into the mother sign, the nourishing sign, the new moon, starting this new cycle. And there's also a solar eclipse. So solar eclipses are just like going to amplify the power of the ritual, because this is a ritual about sovereignty, and it is a ritual about standing in the light of day. Now this year when we're doing the ritual, you know, we're adding this solar eclipse energy, so it's going to be like phenomenal, right? Like, it's just really going to be empowering. And I also recommend doing the ritual during the day to really harness that solar energy. We have a lot of retrogrades right now. So we, let me see, we have Mercury retrograde. So taking it into the ritual, it could be like, okay, so Mercury's retrograde. Sometimes what happens with Mercury retrograde is we have technical difficulties. So just, you know, make sure everything is set up. Any technology you're using, make sure it's charged, and, you know, like take that into account going into the ritual. And that also kind of means that, you know, like, so when a retrograde happens, it's not like Mercury retrograde gets a bad rap, but Mercury, it's about, a retrograde is about a call to like reparations a lot of times. So it's like when we're doing the sovereignty, it's like Mercury's in retrograde. There is going to be like this energy towards fixing communications, and how we can how we can better communicate our sovereignty. Good old Jupiter is retrograde as well. And again, Jupiter is the planet of sovereignty. So when Jupiter is retrograde, it again is like, how do I achieve sovereignty? It's not sovereignty achieved, all is well. It's like I'm contemplating, I'm thinking, I'm activating, I'm working, I'm reorganizing my sovereignty, I'm reorganizing my power. Saturn is retrograde as well. We have, I think there's 7 big retros happening right now. I'm going to talk about 5 of them. So Saturn is, of course, the planet of introspection, of deep, deep thoughts. And when Saturn is retrograde, we see the same kind of energy. So it's like stirring the cauldron, right? We're stirring the cauldron. Saturn is being like, oh, what are these blocks to my sovereignty? So I would say, like our ritual is likely to, as we do the ritual, that there's going to be kind of this like a lot of like emotionality that comes out, a lot of like restructuring of emotion. So I think with Saturn in retrograde, it's going to be really powerful in that level too. Okay, so I did want to talk about Pluto retrograde. And again, Pluto is like even deeper than our Saturn. And Pluto is really about that deep foundational healing. And retrograde, again, retrogrades are not bad. Retrogrades are about, this is a time when, so Pluto is this energy, and when Pluto is retrograde, it's about, okay, there's like a revolution, there's a reverberation, there's a change. There is like, how do we move back to our Pluto being how Pluto is naturally? And that's really, I think that's really important for our true sovereignty, because we need that energy. And, in doing the waning moon release circle in the coven, we've been working on this aspect, right? And getting that through. So Venus is, I skipped over Venus. I've talked about Venus being in retrograde before. So Venus is about getting comfortable again in yourself. Getting comfortable again in yourself. And that is certainly what sovereignty, as we become more sovereign, it's like, it's for everything from like, I'm not going to wear that bra anymore. It's not comfortable, to, I don't want these people in my lives anymore. They don't make me comfortable. So it is a huge solstice. Like I said, we've got the new moon, Cancer, we've got a solar eclipse, we've got all of these planets. And I didn't talk about some of the other retrogrades that are happening. So, for example, Hekate, the star Hekate, is in Sagittarius and is retrograde. So you can see that it's like, the archer, the philosopher, like there's just so much that's going to be coming up in terms of our thinking, our like our own personal philosophies being like revolutionized by this ritual and at this time. And Medea and Persephone are both in Pisces, which is very much about emotions. And Artemis is in Leo. Circe is in Aries. So we kind of have this profile of, when we look to the heavenly representations of these goddesses, you can see that, we have that Aries energy coming up for Circe, a lot of courage, and, Artemis in Leo, and Medea and Persephone in Pisces. So it's just going to be a really powerful, a lot of emotional aspects. This is somewhat tempered, of course, by being in Cancer, that, it's like the nourishment of Cancer, even though Cancer is very much Queen of Cups. It's like all these retrogrades and where the stars associated with our goddesses are at. It's like the overarching kind of nourishment of Cancer being, the sun sign for the ritual, and just starting in Cancer is really going to help us navigate all of these different aspects that are coming up within us and that are influenced by everything that is going on along the starry road. So that is our astrological preparation for our summer goddess ritual. Thank you for listening. You can join Keeping Her Keys by going to keepingherkeys.com/coven. And right now you can get the first month free if you're not already a member. If you are a member and you are looking to further your sovereignty, I highly recommend taking my course, The Sacred Seven. And you can join, if you're already a member, you can get your first 2 weeks free to check it out. And if you're not a coven member, so if you join the coven for your free month, and then you can join the Sacred Seven. But I always recommend people just like hang out in the coven network, see what's available, and see if you're a good fit. See if Keeping Her Keys helps you to become more sovereign.